Crash landing and the unlikely encounter. The night sky was calm over the dense forest, filled with stars that twinkled like tiny diamonds. But then, a streak of bright light cut through the heavens, followed by a deafening roar. Trees shook violently as something large and metallic crashed through the woods, leaving a trail of fire and destruction. Birds scattered, animals ran, and silence returned only after the chaos settled. Lyra groaned as she opened her eyes. She was inside her small escape pod, smoke filling the cabin. Sparks flew from the control panels, and the lights flickered. She tried to move but gasped in pain, realizing her left leg was twisted at an unnatural angle. The pain shot through her like fire, and she gritted her teeth, trying not to scream. Her heart raced. She was stranded on an unknown planet, her pod severely damaged. Her people, the Zyrethians, were explorers of the galaxy, but they rarely visited primitive planets. Earth, a developing world, was on their do-not-visit list. But the meteor storm had left her no choice. Her pod had been hit, and Earth's atmosphere was the closest safe place to crash. With great effort, Lyra pushed open the hatch of her pod. Cool, damp air rushed in, carrying the smell of burnt metal and wet soil. The forest around her was dark and full of strange noises, rustling leaves, distant howls, and the occasional snap of twigs. Lyra crawled out of the pod, her injured leg dragging behind her. Every movement sent sharp pain through her body, but she knew staying in the damaged pod was more dangerous. It could explode at any moment. She reached a clearing and leaned against a fallen tree. Her silver hair, a mark of her species, was damp with sweat. Her purple eyes scanned the surroundings, searching for anything familiar or helpful. But this planet was alien to her, and she felt completely out of place. Suddenly, a sound made her freeze. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate footsteps coming closer. Her heart pounded as she tried to think. Was it a predator? A native of this planet? She had no weapons, no tools, nothing to defend herself. She was completely vulnerable. The bushes parted, and a tall figure stepped into the clearing. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. It was a human male, dressed in rugged clothing that seemed designed for outdoor survival. He had dark brown hair, a beard that looked unkempt but not wild, and piercing green eyes that scanned the area cautiously. Alex had been out hunting that night. The strange crash had caught his attention, and curiosity had drawn him to the site. He wasn't expecting to find an alien. At first, he thought Lyra was a trick of the light, her silvery skin and glowing purple eyes too unusual to be real. But then he saw the blood on her leg and the fear in her expression. Lyra tried to back away, but her injured leg made her cry out in pain. Alex raised his hands, palms out, trying to show he meant no harm. "Easy. I'm not going to hurt you," he said in a calm, steady voice. Of course, Lyra didn't understand his language, but his tone was reassuring. She watched him cautiously as he approached. He knelt a few feet away and pointed to her leg, then to himself, trying to communicate. Lyra hesitated. On her planet, humans were considered primitive, their technology laughably outdated. Yet this one seemed intelligent, even kind. Alex slowly took off his backpack and pulled out a water bottle and a cloth. He poured some water on the cloth and offered it to Lyra. She stared at him, unsure, but her thirst won out. She took the cloth and wiped her face, feeling a small sense of relief. Alex studied her leg, frowning at the severe break. "That's not good," he muttered to himself. He motioned for her to stay still and began gathering sticks and vines from the forest floor. Lyra watched him work, her curiosity growing despite her pain. What was this human doing? She had expected aggression or fear, not this calm resourcefulness. He returned with the sticks and vines, creating a makeshift splint. When Alex approached to set her leg, Lyra panicked. She pushed him away weakly, shaking her head. She didn't trust him, not fully. But Alex spoke softly, his voice steady and confident. He pointed to his own arm, then mimicked a snapping motion, trying to show her what he intended to do. Lyra hesitated but finally nodded. She braced herself as Alex carefully took hold of her leg. The pain was intense, and she cried out, her voice echoing in the forest. But then it was over. The bone was aligned, and Alex quickly secured the splint. Lyra was panting, tears streaming down her face, but the sharp, unbearable pain had lessened. She looked at Alex with wide eyes, unable to believe what had just happened. Alex leaned back, wiping sweat from his brow. "There. That should hold for now," he said, though he knew she didn't understand. He gave her a small smile, and for the first time, Lyra felt a flicker of hope. As Alex helped her drink some water, Lyra thought to herself, maybe humans aren't as primitive as we thought, but she was far from ready to trust him completely. In the distance, an owl hooted, and the forest seemed to settle. But both Lyra and Alex knew that the night was far from over. The true challenges were yet to come. The humans' strange healing methods. The first thing Lyra noticed when she woke up was the sharp smell of wood smoke and something sweet in the air. Her eyes fluttered open, and she found herself lying on a rough but surprisingly comfortable bed. The room was small and made entirely of wood. Walls, floors, ceiling, giving it a strange rustic charm. Warmth radiated from a nearby fire, crackling in a stone fireplace. For a moment, she thought she was back on her home planet, recovering in a med bay. But the dull ache in her leg brought her back to reality. She was still stranded on this primitive planet, her body broken and vulnerable. Her purple eyes scanned the room cautiously. Tools and supplies hung from the walls, strange metal devices she couldn't identify, dry plants tied in bundles, and odd glass containers filled with clear liquid. A faint noise caught her attention, and her gaze shifted to the human. He was seated at a small wooden table, grinding something in a bowl with a focused expression. Alex noticed her movement and turned, his green eyes meeting hers. "You're awake," he said, his tone calm but firm. He stood and walked toward her, holding the bowl. Lyra instinctively flinched, her mind racing with panic. "Easy," Alex said, holding his hands up to show he wasn't a threat. "I'm trying to help you." Of course, she didn't understand his words, but his tone was steady, almost soothing. He sat down next to her, placing the bowl on the floor. Inside was a strange paste that smelled earthy and sharp. Lyra wrinkled her nose, unsure of what he planned to do with it. Alex gestured toward her injured leg, which was now wrapped in strips of cloth and secured with sticks. It wasn't the sleek, glowing medical wraps of her people. It looked rough and crude. Lyra stared at him, unsure if she should let this strange creature touch her again. But the pain in her leg throbbed, and she knew she didn't have many options. Hesitantly, she nodded, a small gesture of trust. Alex got to work. He untied the cloth wrapping her leg, revealing the swollen, bruised skin beneath. Lyra winced, but Alex remained focused. He dipped his fingers into the paste and carefully spread it over her injury. The cool sensation was immediate, and to her surprise, the pain began to fade. Lyra couldn't believe it. How could such a primitive-looking substance have any effect? On her planet, injuries like this were healed with advanced nanobots and lasers, not plants and manual labor. Alex noticed her stunned expression and chuckled softly. "Old trick I learned from my granddad," he said, though he knew she couldn't understand. He gestured to the dry plants hanging from the walls, then to her leg, trying to explain. Lyra didn't respond, but her mind was racing. Humans were supposed to be primitive, barely capable of interstellar travel, let alone advanced medicine. Yet here was this man, using basic tools and knowledge to treat her injury, and it was working. As Alex wrapped her leg again, he suddenly stopped and looked at her. Then, without a word, he held up his own hand and bent one of his fingers back. Lyra's eyes widened as she heard a sharp crack. Alex grimaced for a moment, but then calmly adjusted the finger back into place with a quick snap. Lyra's mouth fell open in shock. The human had just dislocated and reset his own finger without flinching. On her planet, even the thought of such a thing would cause panic. Yet he acted as though it was nothing. Alex noticed her reaction and smiled faintly. "See, not so bad," he said, patting her uninjured knee. He stood up and walked back to the table, leaving Lyra staring after him in disbelief. Her mind struggled to process what she had just seen. This human didn't have the technology of her people, but he had something else. A resilience, a toughness that was almost unnerving. As Alex prepared a small meal from supplies he'd gathered, Lyra leaned back against the bed, her thoughts swirling. Perhaps humans weren't as weak as her people believed. This one had survived in a harsh environment with no advanced tools, no technology, and yet he carried himself with confidence and skill. When Alex returned with a plate of food, Lyra hesitated before taking it. She sniffed the strange dish, a mix of roasted meat and what looked like roots. The smell was foreign but oddly appetizing. Cautiously, she took a bite. It wasn't the nutrient-dense capsules she was used to, but the warmth and flavor were comforting in a strange way. As they ate in silence, Alex occasionally glanced at her, his curiosity clear. Lyra could tell he wanted to know more about her, just as she wanted to understand him. But the language barrier loomed like an invisible wall between them. For now, all Lyra could do was observe. And as she watched Alex clean up the plates and prepare the cabin for the night, she couldn't help but wonder, what else were humans capable of? The alien culture clash. Lyra's leg felt slightly better, though the splint Alex had made still seemed crude to her. She sat on the edge of the bed, watching him move around the cabin. The human was busy sharpening a knife, his movements precise, almost rhythmic. It was fascinating to watch how focused he was, as if every small task was a matter of survival. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the occasional crackling of the fire. Lyra's curiosity got the better of her. She gestured toward the knife, then at Alex, trying to ask why he was sharpening it. He paused, understanding her gesture, and held up the knife. "Protection," he said simply, pointing out the window into the forest. Then he mimicked the motion of stabbing something, followed by a growl, clearly imitating some kind of animal. Lyra blinked, taken aback. On her planet, there were no predators, no need for weapons like this. Advanced energy fields and technology kept her people safe. The idea of relying on a sharp piece of metal to fight off danger seemed almost barbaric. Yet she couldn't deny the practicality of it in this environment. She gestured toward her injured leg, trying to communicate her thoughts. "No technology," she asked in her own language, tapping her head to indicate intelligence. Alex tilted his head, confused. He didn't understand her words but seemed to grasp the question. He shrugged and gestured around the cabin, pointing at the tools, the plants, and himself. "This is all we have," he said, his tone resigned but proud. "We make do." Lyra frowned, her mind racing. Her people had advanced so far beyond this. Pain was eliminated with medical pods, food was synthesized in seconds, and survival was never left to chance. Yet here was a species that had none of that. They fought, hunted, and lived in constant danger. And somehow, they thrived. The realization unsettled her. Were humans resilient because they had to be? Did their struggles make them stronger in ways her people couldn't understand? Her thoughts were interrupted when Alex approached her with a small, steaming cup. He handed it to her, gesturing for her to drink. The liquid inside smelled earthy and unfamiliar. Lyra hesitated, her instincts warning her against consuming anything foreign. Alex noticed her hesitation and smiled. To prove it was safe, he took a sip from his own cup and held it up as if to say, "See, no harm." Reluctantly, Lyra took a small sip. The taste was bitter but warm, and she felt an odd sense of comfort spreading through her. She glanced at Alex, who seemed pleased that she had accepted his gesture. It was a small moment, but it felt significant. Alex sat down across from her and pointed to her leg. "Better," he asked, mimicking the motion of walking with his fingers. Lyra nodded slowly. Better, she said, echoing his word. It was her first attempt at speaking his language, and Alex's eyes lit up in surprise. You understand? He asked, leaning forward. Lyra shook her head, tapping her chest. No, understand, she said haltingly. She gestured to him. You talk. Alex chuckled, scratching the back of his head. Well, that's a start, he muttered, more to himself than to her. He pointed to himself. Alex, he said slowly, then pointed to her. You. Lyra hesitated before responding. Lyra, she said quietly. Lyra. Alex repeated, nodding. He smiled, and for the first time, Lyra felt a strange sense of connection. It wasn't much, but it was something. As the night wore on, Alex began showing her some of the tools and items around the cabin. He pointed to objects, saying their names in his language. Knife, rope, fire. Lyra tried to repeat the words, though her accent made them sound strange. Alex didn't laugh or mock her. Instead, he seemed patient, even encouraging. Lyra found herself oddly enjoying the interaction. Back on her planet, learning was a solitary activity done through neural interfaces that instantly transferred knowledge to the brain. But here, with Alex, it was different. It was slow, imperfect, and full of mistakes. But it felt real. As Alex explained his survival tools, Lyra couldn't help but compare their worlds. On her planet, everything was designed for efficiency and comfort. Here, everything was a challenge. From finding food to staying alive. It was a harsh existence, but there was a raw beauty to it. Her thoughts were interrupted when Alex suddenly froze, his eyes narrowing. He grabbed the knife he had been sharpening and stood, his posture tense. Lyra followed his gaze toward the window, where something moved in the shadows. Alex motioned for her to stay quiet and still. Lyra's heart raced as he moved toward the door, his movements silent and deliberate. She couldn't see what he was looking at, but the tension in the air was palpable. For the first time, Lyra felt a pang of fear, not for herself, but for Alex. Despite his strength and confidence, he was still just one man against whatever danger lurked outside. The night stretched on, and Lyra waited anxiously as Alex disappeared into the darkness, knife in hand. She realized then that survival on this planet wasn't just a skill, it was a way of life, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. A dangerous pursuit. The cabin was quiet, but it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the kind of quiet that made the hairs on the back of Alex's neck stand up. He sat at the small wooden table, sharpening his knife with deliberate, steady movements. The rhythmic sound of the blade against the whetstone filled the room, but his eyes kept darting to the window. Lyra sat on the bed, watching him with growing unease. She had learned to read his expressions, even if she didn't fully understand his words. Right now, his jaw was tight, his shoulders tense, and his green eyes flickered with suspicion. Something was wrong. Outside, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The usual rustling of leaves and distant animal calls were gone. Even the wind had stilled. Lyra felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her chest. She gestured toward Alex, pointing to the window and then to herself. Danger? She asked, her voice tentative. Alex looked up and gave a small nod. Maybe, he said, his voice low. He set the knife down and stood, walking to the window. He pulled back the curtain just enough to peer outside. The moonlight illuminated the forest, but there was nothing to see, only trees and shadows. Lyra's purple eyes followed him closely. She trusted Alex more than she had before, but her instincts told her this wasn't something he could easily handle. She thought back to her own people, who would have scanned the area with advanced drones or energy sensors. Here, Alex relied on his senses alone. It was impressive, but it also felt woefully insufficient against an unknown threat. A sudden sound broke the silence, a faint hum, almost mechanical. Lyra's head snapped toward the window, her heart racing. She knew that sound. It was a Xyrathian tracking drone. No, she whispered in her native language, her voice trembling. She pushed herself to her feet, wincing as pain shot through her leg. They found me. Alex turned to her, frowning at her panicked tone. What's wrong? He asked, stepping closer. Lyra pointed to the window, then mimicked a small flying object with her hand. Drone, she said, using the English word she had learned. Alex's expression darkened. He didn't fully understand what a Xyrathian drone was, but the urgency in her voice told him enough. He grabbed his knife and a makeshift spear he had crafted from a sturdy branch. Stay here, he said firmly, pointing to the bed. Lyra shook her head, her silver hair glinting in the firelight. No, dangerous, she stammered. She tried to explain, gesturing frantically. They think you enemy. Alex's eyes narrowed. He didn't like the sound of that. Great, he muttered under his breath. He moved to the door, glancing back at her one last time. Stay hidden. I'll handle it. Before Lyra could protest, he slipped outside, closing the door softly behind him. She clenched her fists, torn between fear and frustration. How could he possibly handle a Xyrathian drone with nothing but primitive weapons? She limped to the window, her leg throbbing, and peered outside. The hum of the drone grew louder, echoing through the trees. Lyra's sharp eyes spotted the glint of metal moving through the shadows. It was small but deadly, equipped with advanced sensors and weapons. She knew its mission: to locate and eliminate anything it perceived as a threat to her. Alex moved silently through the forest, his every step calculated. He had no idea what this drone was, but he knew enough to take it seriously. He crouched behind a tree, scanning the area. The hum was closer now, and he could see a faint light cutting through the darkness. When the drone finally came into view, Alex's eyes widened. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. A sleek, hovering machine with glowing blue lights and sharp edges. It moved with an eerie precision, scanning the ground as it searched. Alex gripped his spear tightly, his mind racing. He couldn't rely on brute strength alone. He needed a plan. His eyes darted to a nearby tree branch hanging low to the ground. An idea formed, and he quickly climbed the tree, positioning himself above the drone's path. Lyra watched from the window, her heart pounding. She wanted to scream at Alex to stop, to hide, but she knew he wouldn't understand. Instead, she could only watch as he prepared to face something far beyond his understanding. The drone's sensors locked onto a heat signature. Alex's body, still faintly visible despite his elevated position. It hovered closer, its weapons priming with a soft, whirring sound. Alex waited, his muscles tense, every second stretching into an eternity. When the drone was directly beneath him, Alex let out a sharp whistle. The sound distracted the machine for a split second, and Alex seized the opportunity. He leaped from the tree, driving the spear down with all his strength. The tip pierced the drone's outer casing, and sparks flew as it struggled to stabilize. The machine spun wildly, its weapons firing blindly into the trees. Alex rolled to the ground, narrowly avoiding the blasts. He grabbed his knife and lunged at the drone, slicing through exposed wires and panels. With a final, desperate shove, he drove the blade into its core. The drone let out a high-pitched screech before collapsing to the ground, lifeless. Alex stood over it, breathing heavily, his hands covered in cuts from the sharp metal edges. Back in the cabin, Lyra let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She couldn't believe what she had just witnessed. This human, with no advanced technology or knowledge of her world, had taken down a Xyrathian drone with nothing but sheer determination and instinct. When Alex returned to the cabin, dragging the drone's remains behind him, Lyra stared at him in awe. "You win?" she asked, her voice trembling. Alex dropped the wreckage on the floor and gave her a small, tired smile. "Yeah," he said simply. "I win." Lyra couldn't find the words to respond. For the first time, she truly understood that humans were far more dangerous and remarkable than her people had ever imagined. Lyra's hidden abilities. The night outside the cabin was eerily still. The remains of the destroyed drone lay in a heap near the door, its once glowing sensors now dark and lifeless. Alex sat on the floor, bandaging a gash on his arm with strips of cloth. His breathing was steady but heavy, the kind that came after narrowly surviving a life-threatening encounter. Lyra sat silently on the bed, her purple eyes fixed on him. She had been watching him for what felt like hours, trying to make sense of what she had witnessed. Alex was no soldier, no warrior. He didn't have the advanced tools of her people, nor the genetic enhancements that Zerethians relied on. And yet he had defeated a drone, a weapon designed to eliminate threats with brutal efficiency. She wanted to say something, to express her amazement, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she stood and limped toward the wreckage, her injured legs still stiff. She crouched down and ran her fingers over the remains of the drone, inspecting the damage. "You're not going to find much left," Alex said, his voice breaking the silence. "It's just a pile of scrap now." Lyra didn't look up. Instead, she muttered softly in her language, her tone sharp. "This shouldn't happen. Drone, too strong." Alex frowned, not understanding her words but catching the frustration in her tone. He set the bandages aside and stood, walking over to her. "You think I got lucky?" he asked, gesturing to the broken machine. Lyra hesitated before nodding. "Lucky, yes, but also skill," she said, her voice halting as she tried to piece together his language. Alex raised an eyebrow, a small smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I'll take that as a compliment," he said. He crouched down next to her, studying the drone with her. "What about you? Do you have anything to help us if more of these things show up?" Lyra froze, her fingers still on the drone. She had avoided this question since the crash, pretending she was helpless. But now, after everything Alex had done, she couldn't keep it a secret anymore. Taking a deep breath, Lyra stood and turned to face him. "I can help," she said slowly. She placed a hand on her chest. "I have power." Alex tilted his head, intrigued but skeptical. "Power? What kind of power?" Instead of answering, Lyra extended her hand toward the drone's wreckage. Her silver hair seemed to shimmer faintly as she focused, her brow furrowing. Alex watched in disbelief as the pieces of the drone began to move, slowly at first, then faster. The broken parts floated into the air, spinning in a controlled orbit around her hand. Alex took a step back, his green eyes wide. "What the?" Lyra's voice was calm, but there was a hint of strain. "Telekinesis," she said simply. "My people can move objects, small things, but I can do more." The spinning debris suddenly flew outward, scattering across the cabin in a controlled burst. None of it hit Alex, though a shard came close enough to make him flinch. Lyra lowered her hand, breathing heavily from the effort. For a long moment, Alex didn't say anything. He just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, finally, he let out a low whistle. "Okay," he said, crossing his arms. "That's impressive." Lyra blinked, surprised. "Not scared?" Alex shook his head. "Scared? No. Confused? Yeah. But scared? Not really." He rubbed the back of his neck, glancing at the scattered debris. "Why didn't you use this before? Could have saved us both a lot of trouble." Lyra looked down, guilt flickering across her face. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "If I use power, more drones come. My people track me." Alex's frown deepened. "So, using your powers makes it easier for them to find you?" She nodded. "Yes, but now, no choice. If more drones come, I help." Alex thought about that for a moment, then gave her a small nod. "Fair enough. Just don't overdo it. We'll need you in one piece if this gets worse." Lyra's lips twitched into a small smile, a rare moment of lightness in the tense atmosphere. "You trust me." Alex shrugged. You trusted me when I fixed your leg. Guess it's only fair I return the favor. Lyra's smile grew, and for the first time since her crash landing, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. As the two began preparing for the next encounter, Lyra showing Alex how to use her telekinetic abilities strategically, and Alex teaching her more about Earth's terrain. The cabin felt less like a temporary refuge and more like a place of teamwork. But outside, the forest remained quiet. Too quiet. And both of them knew the peace wouldn't last long. The galactic arrival. The eerie hum of an approaching ship cut through the silence of the forest. The trees quivered as the air vibrated with energy, and a soft, bluish light began to filter through the dense canopy. Lyra froze mid-step, her sharp ears catching the distinct sound she had been dreading. She turned to Alex, her face pale. "They're here," she whispered, her voice trembling. Alex didn't need a translation to understand the fear in her tone. He grabbed his spear and knife, his jaw tightening. "How many are we talking about?" he asked, his voice steady but low. Lyra hesitated, glancing at the sky through a small gap in the trees. "Not just drones," she said, struggling to find the right words in his language. "Soldiers, my people." Alex's grip on his weapons tightened. He had faced many threats in his time in the wilderness. Wild animals, harsh weather, and now alien technology. But the thought of trained alien soldiers was a different kind of challenge. "What do they want?" he asked. Lyra lowered her head. "Me," she admitted. "And they think you. Enemy." Alex let out a slow breath, his mind racing. He had spent his life surviving against impossible odds, but this was something new. He wasn't just protecting himself anymore. He was caught in the middle of something far bigger. "Then we'll have to make them see I'm not the bad guy," he said, his voice firm. The sound of the ship grew louder, and moments later, it descended into the clearing near the cabin. The craft was sleek and metallic, with glowing lines running along its sides. It hovered a few feet above the ground before settling with a soft hiss. A ramp extended, and a group of figures emerged. Lyra stepped closer to Alex, her heart pounding. The soldiers were clad in advanced armor, their faces hidden behind smooth, reflective helmets. Each carried a weapon that looked far more advanced than anything Alex had ever seen. The lead figure, taller than the others, stepped forward and removed their helmet. It was a Zyrathian male, his silver hair and sharp features marking him as one of Lyra's people. His glowing blue eyes locked onto Lyra, and his expression was stern. "Lyra," he said in their language, his voice cold. "You've caused quite a disturbance. Come with us now." Lyra straightened, her fear replaced by a flicker of defiance. "I can't leave," she replied in Zyrathian. "This human saved my life. He's not a threat." The commander's gaze shifted to Alex, his expression hardening. "The human? You let a primitive creature touch you? Heal you? You've disgraced our people." Alex couldn't understand the words, but the commander's tone made it clear he wasn't being complimented. He stepped forward, raising his hands in a show of peace. "I'm not looking for trouble," he said, his voice calm. "But if you're here to hurt her, you'll have to go through me." The soldiers raised their weapons, the glowing barrels humming with energy. Alex didn't flinch, his green eyes locked onto the commander, his stance unwavering. Despite the overwhelming odds, he looked every bit as fierce and determined as the predators he had faced in the wild. The commander sneered. "Do you hear that, Lyra? This creature thinks he can protect you. How amusing." Lyra stepped between them, her hands outstretched. "Stop. He's not what you think. He's strong, resourceful, and—" she paused, searching for the words in English. "He is more than you see." The commander raised an eyebrow. "Prove it," he said coldly. "Let the human face me in a trial. If he wins, I will listen. If he fails, he dies." Alex's eyes narrowed. He didn't fully understand what was being said, but he could tell the conversation wasn't going in his favor. He glanced at Lyra. "What's he saying?" Lyra swallowed hard, her voice shaky. He wants a challenge. Fight him. Alex smirked, rolling his shoulders. A fight, huh? Fine. Let's see what your people are made of. Before Lyra could protest, Alex stepped forward, meeting the commander in the clearing. The soldiers formed a circle around them, their weapons lowered but ready. The tension in the air was thick as the two faced off. The commander removed his armor, revealing a lean but muscular frame. He pulled a sleek, glowing blade from his side, its edge shimmering with energy. Alex, armed only with his spear and knife, looked almost comically underprepared, but his eyes were sharp, and his stance was steady. The commander lunged first, his blade cutting through the air with a faint hum. Alex dodged, his movements quick and precise. He countered with a strike from his spear, forcing the commander to step back. Lyra watched with bated breath, her hands clenched at her sides. Alex's movements were raw and unrefined compared to the commander's, but they were effective. Every dodge, every counter was calculated, born from years of survival in the wild. The fight continued, a clash of brute strength and advanced skill. Alex took several hits, his clothes torn and blood seeping from shallow wounds, but he didn't falter. With a final, desperate move, he disarmed the commander, sending the glowing blade flying into the dirt. The clearing fell silent. Alex stood over the commander, his knife poised but not striking. He stepped back, tossing the knife aside. "I'm not here to kill anyone," he said, breathing heavily. "I'm here to protect her." The commander stared at him, his expression a mix of shock and grudging respect. He stood slowly, dusting himself off. "You're stronger than I thought, human," he admitted. "Perhaps. I misjudged you." Lyra stepped forward, her voice firm. "He saved me. He's not our enemy." The commander hesitated before nodding. "Very well. We'll leave you in peace, for now." As the soldiers returned to their ship, Alex glanced at Lyra, his face bruised but triumphant. "Well," he said with a wry grin, "that was fun." Lyra couldn't help but smile. "You surprised them," she said softly. "And me." The night wasn't over, but for the first time, Lyra felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, things would turn out all right. A lasting bond. The forest was calm again, the hum of the alien ship fading into the night sky. The tension that had filled the air was gone, replaced by the soft sounds of rustling leaves and distant crickets. Alex sat on the wooden steps of his cabin, staring out into the darkness, his body aching from the fight. His shirt was torn, and dried blood streaked his arms, but there was a quiet pride in his green eyes. Lyra stood behind him, leaning against the doorframe. Her injured leg was still stiff, but her heart felt lighter. She had never thought a human, someone her people considered primitive, could stand against a Zyrethian commander and emerge victorious. And yet, Alex had done it, not with advanced weapons or superior technology, but with sheer determination and skill. "You fought, for me," Lyra said softly, breaking the silence. Alex glanced back at her and smiled faintly. "Of course I did. What kind of person would I be if I didn't?" Lyra stepped forward, carefully lowering herself onto the steps beside him. She studied his face, the cuts and bruises telling the story of his bravery. On her planet, such injuries would be healed instantly. But here, they were a badge of honor. "You're different," she said, her words slow and deliberate as she tried to use his language. "Humans, not weak." Alex chuckled, leaning back against the railing. "We're not perfect, that's for sure, but we don't give up. That's one thing we're good at." Lyra nodded, her silver hair catching the moonlight. She thought back to her own people, who had spent centuries perfecting their technology, eliminating pain and hardship. But in doing so, had they lost something? Watching Alex, she couldn't help but wonder if her people's comfort had made them weaker in ways they didn't realize. The two sat in silence for a while, the cool night air wrapping around them. Finally, Lyra spoke again. "I need help," she said, her voice hesitant. "To stay strong. To learn, like you." Alex raised an eyebrow, surprised. "You want me to teach you?" Lyra nodded. "Yes. Your way. It's hard. But strong." Alex thought about it for a moment, then grinned. "All right, Lyra. But fair warning, my way isn't easy. You'll have to work hard." "I will," she promised, her voice steady. The next few days passed in a blur of new challenges and discoveries. Alex taught Lyra how to navigate the forest, how to build traps, and how to defend herself with the tools available. At first, she struggled, her movements awkward and her patience thin. But with each passing day, she grew more confident, her natural agility and intelligence helping her adapt quickly. In return, Lyra began teaching Alex about her people's technology. She showed him how to use a small handheld device salvaged from the drone, turning it into a makeshift scanner for detecting heat signatures. Alex was amazed at her ingenuity and quickly found ways to integrate the alien tech into his survival strategies. Their bond grew stronger with each lesson, each shared laugh, and each moment of quiet understanding. Despite their differences, they found common ground in their resilience and determination to face whatever challenges came their way. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Alex turned to Lyra, his expression thoughtful. "So, what's next for you? Do you plan to go back to your people?" Lyra hesitated, staring into the flames. "I don't know," she admitted. "My world, it's different now. I see things new way." Alex nodded. "Well, you're welcome to stay here as long as you need. This place isn't much, but it's safe." Lyra smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes. "Thank you, Alex." The fire crackled softly between them, the orange glow casting dancing shadows on the cabin walls. In that moment, it didn't matter that they came from different worlds. They were two beings, bound by shared experiences and mutual respect. As the stars twinkled above, Lyra looked up at the sky, her voice quiet but firm. "Maybe humans and Zarithians can learn from each other." Alex followed her gaze, his lips curling into a small smile. "Maybe. But if they do, they'll have you to thank for it." Lyra didn't respond, but deep down, she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't known before. She wasn't just an explorer or a survivor anymore. She was something more, a bridge between two worlds. The night deepened, and the two of them sat in comfortable silence, knowing that whatever the future held, they would face it together.